we're talking about a significant number of children who are growing up and experiencing an artificial to their organism form of confusion, that they're feeling there's something wrong with them because they're confused. And in their avoidance of that confusion, it's decapitating their learning.
Well, I agree with you.
Let's go really meta and just ask the first question: what is reading?
What is reading? Reading is the ability to correctly pronounce the words on the page. That for me is the bottom end.
Suppose we were Martian anthropologists, and we were coming to Earth, and we were watching human beings engage in this strange behavior of reading. How we would describe it as a anthropologist looking at another species doing it, as a phenomena, as a thing, like walking, and what is it?
Well, like I say, on the other end for me is that reading is, reading is what you do with text, and that gives you goosebumps at the appropriate time, or just makes you giggle out of control, or makes you cry, makes you angry. It makes you reflect and wonder. I mean, I think that when I across the period of a day, I probably have almost all of those responses. As I read, I can't.
But don't you have that in conversation with other people as you're talking with them too?
I do.
What makes reading different than that?
Well, reading is, there's a text of some sort in front of you. That could be a web page. It could be an email. It can
So
be
what is text?
An article. It's that language written down.
Okay. Good. All right. So could we say, and I'm gonna say what I think it is, and we can beat on it a little bit, right? That we're talking about a code-informed and instructed virtual or artificial language experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not, the only part there that I disagree with, I guess, is the artificial part. I'm not sure that the conversations I have with the author, which tend to be internal conversations, are any less authentic than the conversations I'm having with you, or they have with my colleagues or my wife. They're different in the sense that they're not visible, because most of the time when I'm reading, I'm not actually talking out loud. I'm neither reading out loud, nor is this internal speech.
Okay, good. Good. I think that's great. So you say that it is code informed and instructed virtual language experience.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't disagree with, as we started out, English is written in an alphabetic code. Other languages have chosen other types of codes to represent language. And I don't know anyone who learned to read without instruction. I think that all of our debates are about what kind of instruction and how much instruction. There are days in which I think the instruction is the overrated part. I think it takes relatively small doses of any sort of explicit instruction, coupled with an environment that is engaging and motivating, and tasks or texts that produce high levels of success. The notion that and I think that's part of where we've gone wrong with our struggling readers. We bring them into these special little programs and end up talking at them, and in many cases doing a lot of the work for them, and they never have the volume of successful experiences. And if you've ever looked at the traditional content of remedial and special education programs for what kids are likely to read, particularly at the struggling level, they're often reading these incredibly contrived texts that you'd have to ask yourself, what's the point? It is not going to give me a goosebump. It's not going to make me giggle. It's not making me wonder, other than the only wondering I'm having is, why do I have to do this? You know?
Yeah, so I'm going to come back to that in just a second, 'cause I think that's really important. It's, I mean, you listen to the kind of conversations 4 and 5-year-olds have on the street corner when they're playing with each other, the amount of language richness and affect in it, and all of that. Compare that to what it is they can read. Who the hell would want to read it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course not. But what's the difference? It's because of the technological mediation process accessing this language rather than this one. It's not the mental process of experiencing the language. It's the way this language experience is being mediated and their access to that. Not.
Well, that's where I think we've, one of the unfortunate limitations of the National Reading Panel report was they talked about 5 of what I suggest are probably 10 or 15 pillars of effective reading instruction. And one component they didn't write about at all was writing. And I really think that some kids, the reason to learn to read isn't really to read, it's to write. It's to get their words down, to get their stories down, because they've got a story about some superhero, or they've got a story about the trick their pet dog can do, or what they learned about dairy cows last night, working with their dad out in the barn, that they just want to get down. And it really is a feeling of power. I write. When I see an article in a magazine, or a journal that comes out, I have that little feeling of accomplishment. And I've been doing this for 30, 40 years and fairly successful at it. But, if none of my articles ever got published, I don't know that I'd be as interested in writing, in the professional sense. It's getting, my writing and kids' writing is an extension of them. I think it's a very ego-involved thing.
Yes, and there's no question that writing can create a slow, stroboscopic way to practice spelling and letter sounds and all of that. And yet, this comes back to reading again. One of the reasons that we use the word artificial, once you're on the point where what you're reading, the mechanics of letter sounds and what have you, and the assembly of that language experience is invisible, transparent, and happening fast enough and without conscious strain and so forth, then it pops into being a language experience, not unlike our conversation, at which point there's that part of it, there's nothing unnatural about, right? But up to that point, before it breaks to transparency, when their minds are stuttering, when there's this starting and stopping going on, right? That's in relation to a kind of challenge that they're experiencing, which is being induced artificially. In other words, if we take from what both the neuroscience cuts and we talked earlier about, my sense, the limitations. So I'm not saying neuroscience knows the answers here, but from what they do know, from work like Keith Rayner's on eye movements and eye tracking and what have you, what we're talking about is having to resolve the confusions between letters and sounds faster than we can possibly think in order for this thing to pop into transparency at a flow rate that approximates our conversational language modes. If this doesn't form, if we don't learn to do that, then it has these major consequences for how our general processing infrastructure functions and how we feel about ourselves when we're confused. And this is in relation to the confusion in letter sounds that's engendered because of some scribes, printing press technicians, and a whole lot of people that didn't give a damn about children over the past 400 or 500 years.
Well, and what's remarkable in one sense is that, given the messiness of the relationship between the alphabet and pronunciation in English, at least, that how many people successfully manage to become readers, and particularly given the relatively low levels of professional training that we provide for teachers, and the real limitations of science in how we might go about designing programs that would make good teaching easier.